Yo, what's up, everybody? I'm trying to refrain from getting a huge built up sum of things that I want to present on, like my video entitled Evacuation of Information. And here is a little diagram that I've been wanting to explain for a minute now. So I kind of sent this out amongst and to some of my peers, and the real friendly ones told me, hey man, we didn't know that you had a 5-year-old son. That's cool that he's putting up artwork on your fridge. So anything that you would like to say that's harmful really is nothing that and is less extreme than the closest of my friends has already said. Anyways, this is Electri City. So I'm using basic circuit principles here, and if there was a legend, you'd see that right there's a bell, the power source, and that's a light bulb above that guy's head, who is actually a light himself. He's the sun, right? And this is a mixing and intermingling of organic and inorganic. I have a lot of conversations with a lot of my friends spanning a wide range of topics. But one of them that I really get into a lot of depth with is one concerning organic and inorganic computers. Whereas we can look at the whole system of the earth as, let's say, like an organic computer, and then we can look at like inorganic computers, such as we know as the devices which carry currency, that is electricity, to and through different components, and the pathway that the current takes, which activates different devices and hardware components, gives us different readings in different instruments, and then based upon the software that these components are utilizing, and a lot of the basic software is incorporated into hardware initially, and things like the motherboard and whatnot, which then can read and write other forms of software which are written in hardware. It will then utilize these components in a different arrangement to give us the results that we would like to experience. But now I would like to ask you the question, truly what is inorganic and organic when the components of either collapsed into an overarching picture, then themselves become one and the same, where the formation and the amalgamation of either in their totality to an extent become the other extent. So to go over this diagram now, so we have this, which in simple circuits will represent the power source. Now, I put that there's resistance in between these two diodes, which represent the source of power for this entire circuit here. And that is based upon a philosophy of conflict. The philosophy of conflict, which gives us a sense of experience, the one for the other for the one, and vice versa, and so on and so forth. And obviously you can see here that I have a tear amidst these two factions, which is represented in the form of a lightning bolt, right? Now, these two warring factions, which are in a sense a daydream of these two diodes, have a built-up summation of their experience, Neither one is necessarily right or wrong. There's a left and right, but who's to say what's left and who's to say what's right? It's all based upon how you look at it. So anyways, there's a war of words, so to speak, going on, which give every word meaning. Now, we travel out from that initial experience of there being a separation of experiences. Now, we see perspective come into play here, where we go down this pathway, there's two men sitting on a chair, ringing a bell, right? It's like they're playing a game and they're recalling memories which through them playing the game, they're supportive of the war, the conflict. And in the conflict is meaning, which they then utilize through a system of responses, recalling memory to then hopefully win the game, right? Now, either side we go down is going to have different representations of connectivity amongst the circuit itself. And I'm going to be utilizing some symbols which may be universally understood if you study such things, and then I'll be going off in some abstracts, just representing some fanciful thoughts, if you will. So on this side, we have the guy, he's traveling up this roller coaster, as it were, which then eventually, transports him right there or whatever. He's playing the game. He doesn't necessarily know it, but he is. Now we have the energy of activation, the total summation of the energy involved to get over the hump, in which then the reaction proceeds forward, whatever have you. Conservation of energy, displacement, but then also obviously there's utilization of orientation, which allows things on the chemical diagram of life to react in a much similar way as letters and words within the context of a much larger document, where the letters and words play different roles based upon what's around them, and each one has their own kind of action based upon what they are, but then those actions are changing, and I'm getting off the point here. This guy's going up this on a roller coaster, coming down the other side. There's an energy involved to overcome the obstacle, and then he can ride his way down. Over here, we have a guy sitting at the electric chair. Now, I chose to represent this man in an electric chair. He's getting shocked because he's being sentenced, which to a certain degree is a loss of senses, as he is totally and fully aware of his surroundings and not at all encumbered by intrinsic or internal thought. He is literally just immersed in experience, and that's what it's like to be sentenced, where literally you're defined, your motion is something which is moved beyond yourself. To a certain extent, you're then dead, because you're incapable of moving beyond your bounds, right? So there's a play on perspective here. The man being incapable of moving beyond his bounds, but he sees it as being in an electric chair, sentenced to death because he is being defined. And over here, the one who's seeing it in an enjoyable manner, to a certain extent, obviously he's buckled in, strapped up in the roller coaster, going up and down, traveling through life in this manner, defined, but seeing it from a different point of view. And then we have, obviously, a sense of freedom upon the death of the thing, just through whimsical nature. The man's soul is escaping the body as a bird. But truly, neither is more free than the other. Going over here, we have a body which is voting as to whether or not to execute, right? And there's another key word there, execute. This individual here, right? And that has to do with closing this gate, which is an antenna receiving the words, as it were, which are merely just a signal transferred through space. And we're seeing an intermingling now of this whole inorganic and organic, where they are being represented as a technical device, but they themselves are operating in an organic manner, which then open or closes this gate. Okay, we see the hump here that the fish are climbing up, like the salmon, very similar to the hump over here. This has some parallels in regards to one of my writings on the philosophy, where being aware of the work or doing the work based upon feeling You know, you yourself can be balanced, but then you can balance yourself externally through, let's say, balance sheets. One is a conscious way of looking at the energies involved in your life to balance your life. The other is balancing your life through the feeling of balance itself. Now, I'm going to kind of skip down over these next two parts because we're going to come back to them. So we get down here, and the thing itself is an entire circuit. It's a diagram, so the whole thing connects in a cycle, right? Where I am intermingling what would just be wires in a normal diagram that you would read with the currency of water flowing then through now this river into a lake. We see people on here expending this energy, and this all has to do with then perspective, maybe a little bit of intermingling between free will, some initial cause going on, and the transcendence and domino effect, and the ripple effect of these waves within reality is the guy that's fishing. You can see that the ripples are coming off of where the fish is splashing, the wake coming off of the water skier and whatnot. Now we have the transference of information being then again changed through medium, now on a roadway, which is like the interconnected manner between different intelligences such as cities. Come over here, and then now we have this whole parallel of like the outdoor life, and I did a whole poetic expose on, you know, you being within the wilderness, but then stepping out into the wilderness when you leave your home. But your home is your home because you see the mountain as a couch, and it's this whole play on perspective, right? So we kind of have that up here going on, and then this is, you know, paralleled with that, which is then paralleled with, you know, the sense of freedom, right, which is going on up here. Everything's shocked into awareness. Now, I'm going to do some intense abstract thoughts here, where we have the individual waiting to get on the bus, which is then on the road, which is then transforming itself into this leaf, where we then have the caterpillar, which is symbolic of being this bus. It's filled with things, and it's composed of other intelligences. It itself has a sense of itself, but itself is composed of other selves. Now, the caterpillar then goes through this transformative stage, a metamorphosis, as it were. And we have a squirrel on there and some nuts, because this is just little nuts, right? But it's still fun to look at. And what's going on within the cocoon, we then now have these individuals, right? They're in school, whatever, whatnot, what have you. This is the tree, the ascending pathways of the branches spreading and becoming and traversing into different areas. Depending on how you look at it, they're just cracks in the sky, kind of fracturing reality and introspectively growing as we move within them. Some guys leaving class coming down here off of a whim. They're roasting things over a fire, which is heating up these chemicals, which is also symbolized as them looking out, off, and beyond. We're going through another transformative process here, where instead of representing the final phase of the cocoon as a butterfly, I then have it as this space vehicle, which is about to blast off and fly off. Now, coming back over here, you can see that I have this little bit of a sideshow, and he's up on stage, but he's just being viewed by a bunch of sardines in a can. You know, there's some perils along the way, but the perils themselves are just part of the conflict, which in a sense give the whole thing feeling based upon the resistance. Now, the man in the middle here, who is the sun, which is kind of just a continuation of this mountain range. This is symbolizing the amalgamation of this entire experience into the individual, us, the actors. But what is up on stage? And what does this entail? This whole story, this whole pathway, this experience of what we call life. Well, that's where the currency comes into play, right? Because what we support through currency then gains our direct attention. But what truly is the stage? And what is playing currently? Because whether you think it or not, everything was once initially just a dream. And then I interspersed some Latin through the alphabet, where this character then is just composed through an amalgamation of code, rather than seeing the perspective as this living embodiment of Electri City. We then reduce it down to its initial and most base form. There you have it. Electri City. On fate, like a lip that gives you a handle on things. With a lip, it is graspable, being still enough to have a little fat. When fate is on your side, nothing is naturally more supportive of your movement. Overcome by fat rather than your ability to deny it. Freedom can't be fed with your neglect to exercise it. What's fate to one though? Let's say a thing never stops. Is this then its fate? Its constant motion, a prediction? So in a sense it doesn't move? Then what's the muscle that moves a thing? If what gives a thing its sense of motion differs, regardless of what moves you, the concept of motion transcending the semantics of individual perspective into an overarching ideology applicable and understood by all things understanding. Me on fate. So now I'm doing some wordplay here, and this is a dangerous exercise that I find myself involved in frequently, far too frequently, where I just do word association. Like for this I literally just said, well, fate spelled like fat. Fat can be condemning towards you utilizing a sense of freedom, because then you're confined to a space and you're unable to move, which is very similar to fate in its concepts, because we're unable to move outside of our fate. So in a sense you become fat. And then I did some more word association where fats are lipids, and so I then did some association where it holds true to a degree, where like a lip that gives you a handle on things, because if you are fated, then you know you will succeed. So you're able to handle things much more better, right? So it has a lip that you can grasp, which is a handle. Dun dun dun. So the whole thing's full of a ton of different wordplay, and obviously it is dangerous to do this with, you know, conceptual understandings of a lot of different words, because you can go off into tangents where obviously things are totally unapplicable and you're just bending reason to your will. Because with wordplay and association, You can literally then describe anything as everything as you just kind of expand upon the thought and utilize it in the context, which then paints it into the light that then allows you to see the picture that you want to see. But you know, going off on such a tangent reminds me that, you know, anything can be everything pretty much. And we like to think that what is kind of like a natural occurrence, especially in academic study, but truly what's natural and unnatural, and we ourselves are an essential part of this natural process. What we then influence things to do is no more unnatural than a microscopic organism that we include within the definition of the thing itself, influencing it towards the behavior that we then call natural. So truly, what is unnatural? And then kind of going off on that, we can then see how it's reasonable to apply such things to anything. I really like this portion of the works. The concept of motion transcending the semantics of individual perspective. Now, what I'm talking about here is that since I'm using fat as kind of the term fate interchangeably, I'm saying, what is fate? Because it's something that differs based upon perspective of the thing that we're talking about, you know. This is fated to that, and that's fated to this, so to speak, right? But then truly understanding the concept of motion, this then, through perspective and relative understanding, is transcended by the concept itself into an overarching ideology, applicable and understood by all things that are understanding of it. Where then this sense of motion is a feeling that is gauged based upon the exercise of freedom from fate, which is then applicable to all things with motion. You know, what are you going to invest in? Because that's eventually what ends up on stage. And that decides where it is that we'll go.